Oi, 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 YouTube. Welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are feeling great, getting some sunshine, drinking some water, and unclenching your jaw. Today, of course, we're going to be discussing how to better understand and control maps and create map pressure so that you, as a killer, are far more intentional with your time and effective at getting those survivors. That is, of course, to say that today we are going to be discussing the 3-gen strategy. So let's get started. Let's first start with the basic understanding of what this strategy means. In any given map of Dead by Daylight, there are a total of 7 generators that spawn. 5 of these generators have to be completed to allow the survivors to open the exit gates and escape. The term 3-gen refers to how many generators will be left on the map when the survivors just have one more generator left to repair. And the strategy is employed when the 3 remaining generators are all right next to each other, allowing the killer to pressure all of them nearly simultaneously. Let's get a quick misconception out of the way though. Using the 3-gen strategy is not holding the game hostage and is not a bannable or reportable offense. Survivors can, and often do, play around a strong 3-gen. And the best survivors will do their best in the early game to break a 3-gen before it happens. Now, when it comes to using the 3-gen strategy, let's break it down step by step. Step 1. When you spawn into a map, take a moment to assess where all of the generators are. If you spawn in the middle of a map, be sure to spin a full 360 and check all of the generators. Step 2. Identify what generators appear the furthest away from others or the most spread out from other generators. These are the generators that you don't want to spend too much time trying to focus on, control, or otherwise. The reality is, you have to be okay with losing these generators at some point. Step 3. Identify a cluster of 3 or 4 generators. Ideally, you would want to identify what half of the map is best for you to stay on so that you may apply as much pressure as possible to as many generators as possible and create a dead zone for the future second half of the game. Identifying a cluster of 4 also allows you a bit of flexibility if you lose a generator at some point during the match and need to shift your 3-gen. Step 4. Play out the match while trying to be mindful of where people are. This will require that you as the killer can think of where every survivor is almost all of the time. This will require an insane amount of practice, so be sure that you're okay with practicing. Be sure you're not overcommitting to chases. And of course, we have a video here to help you know when to break away from a chase or when to commit to a chase. A huge thing you'll need to be able to keep track of throughout your matches in the back of your mind always is what generators have what progress, and contrasting that progress with your chases and how long it is taking you to complete your chases, all right? A good example is that a generator that has 1 survivor on it takes about 80 seconds to complete without toolboxes, additional perks, etc. If you know the generators in your 3-gen had 0% progress, you can safely chase for 20 to 30 seconds outside of your 3-gen to get somebody down. But you'll need to be able to constantly think in your mind, how long has this chase been? And are there people on my 3-gen? If so, roughly here is how far the generator has progressed. It's time for me to go back. Perks like Discordance will help you to know if survivors are ganging up on a generator, as a gen with 2 or more survivors gets done in about 45 seconds or less. This may help you to adjust where you're chasing and for how long so that you can come back and defend your territory and split pressure, wound multiple people, etc. However, be very careful because perks like Discordance could also be a huge distraction. A good example is here on Thompson House. The 3-gen is right here to the right-hand side of the house, but Discordance pops across the map. Before I even think of checking that Discordance, I need to take a peek at my 3-gen, because if I had went out to chase where the shack is, I would have lost my 3-gen and potentially lost this match. Now, this is a big deal. As your match goes on, the mistake you don't want to make is to guard your generators so tightly that you end up never getting a down or a hook on survivors. If you find that you aren't downing survivors as fast as you would like and it is causing you to lose generators, there are ways to figure out how you can speed up your chasing. But chasing someone for 30 seconds, hitting them once, and retreating back to your gens just so they can retreat and heal becomes a lather, rinse, repeat that inevitably will end in your loss, all right? There is a finesse and balance to chasing outside of your 3-gen that will take some time to master. It can be a slow game, like right here, where there was a David and a Meg, and anytime I approached either gen, they got away or they hid incredibly well, and they put a lot of pressure on me and almost broke my 3-gen between the two of them. But I had to play the long game and catch them in a spot where they were more disorganized than they normally would be. After successfully downing a survivor, of course, this is a big deal. You need to check and see if you can safely hook that survivor in your 3-gen territory. Of course, the hope here is that you can then pressure the generators and the hook at the same time. A good example here is this Dwight who's in the basement, and the 3-gens are surrounding him. So I'm going to go around, kick the generators, break any pallets I need to, and set some traps as trapper, and he's going to sit in the basement for a little bit. I don't necessarily need to fully leave this area because these generators are here and the survivor is here, but it's really not great for you just to sit in one spot and wait for him to die either, all right? You don't want to camp the hook. This can become too dangerous if survivors do sneak into the 3-gen to break it without you necessarily knowing, okay? There's a fine line. You will want to be very alert and very aware if you do leave the area, however, all right? A good example is if you have chased away from your 3-gen, all right, and the survivor that was hooked at the 3-gen gets unhooked, they may jump immediately on a generator, and you're gonna need to keep that in mind. You'll need to know, okay, when you left that generator, it had 25% progress. They got unhooked, which means 2 people are on that gen. If you have discordance, it might go off. And so you need to think to yourself, well, 25%, that generator only has 20 seconds left on it. I need to get back, things like that, all right? The other factor here is that ideally, you need to have one survivor dead by the time they have 2 gens left to complete. That's kind of the perfect scenario. The sooner the better, all right? Now, again, we don't camp and we don't necessarily tunnel. It's really great if you just bounce between 2 different survivors, all right? But certainly by the time they have 1 gen left to complete, you need to have somebody dead. Again, kind of what we talked about earlier with the David and the Meg. The reason why that is because strong teams can whittle away at generators just by splitting up, all right? If 4 people are left and 3 gens are left, you could be chasing 1 person while 3 others split themselves amongst generators, or hell, they could even group up and knock out a gen in 30 seconds, all right? Having 1 survivor dead lessens the pain of that equation drastically and means you chasing 1 person leaves only 2 individuals and gives you just a little bit more time for you to make that slow progress, that slow gain, all right? And even better, if there's only 3 people left and you hook 1, start chasing another, that means the other person who could be on a gen has to come off the gen to get the unhook. So everybody becomes tied up. And that's kind of the peripheral knowledge you'll have to always remember, all right? As you learn to 3-gen teams, you'll see that most of the time in the early game, they'll start to try to break your 3-gen, which means you get to bust up pallets and further break down the resources they could use to stop you, okay? Which means in the late game, most pallets should be broken. It should be a dead zone. It should be a lot easier to defend, all right? If your 3-gen doesn't become a dead zone for survivors in terms of resources, maybe you spent a little bit too much time outside of the 3-gen, all right? And that is it. Those are our major tips for how to hold a 3-gen and create your own map pressure regardless of the killer that you choose to play in Dead by Daylight. Let me know if these are tricks or tips you've never heard before, or if there are things you didn't understand in the comments below. And of course, let me know if this works out for you. And of course, I will be praying to the entity to see you guys in the next video.